Hello and welcome to this tutorial called Introduction to GarageBand. We will be using GarageBand 10, and this accompanies the handout. To begin, I'm going to open an empty project and just talk briefly before we start about the paragraph at the top, which talks about GarageBand as a recording and sequencing software for Macintosh computers. So there's a few things there. The recording part is fairly obvious, that you can record sounds. You can also record yourself playing certain instruments into the program directly. But the sequencing part is one I'd like you to pay attention to, because the sequencing is the part of GarageBand that allows you to take blocks of music, so take short segments of music and move them around and copy them and arrange them in whatever order you would like to build a larger piece of music. So many songs are actually based on small amounts of musical material that are repeated or changed just a little bit. And so by using GarageBand, you can make those basic pieces of music and expand them out to make larger work. The next part of that paragraph says, it operates using MIDI technology. And MIDI is an important word I'd like you to remember. It stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface, as you can see there. And MIDI is how we refer to the language of making music with computers. And really what it comes down to is a system that was developed in the 80s to help computer keyboards, or to help musical keyboards, record information on computer. The pieces of information that they record are usually when a note is turned on, when a note is turned off, that is when you push your finger down on a key, when you pick it up off the key, and how fast you did that. So how fast your finger was moving when you pushed the key, which is called velocity, which ends up making a louder or softer sound. So in this tutorial, we're going to run through some of the key features on the main GarageBand screen, and where possible, I'd like you to draw the icon that you find on GarageBand on the right side of your page where it says icon. So I'm going to just create a track here. And so right away it brings up this musical typing keyboard. I'm going to close that for now. You can do that either by hiding musical typing or by going Command K. Please note, by the way, all these options up here Please note that many of the options you will find in these menus, like File and Edit and so on, also have shortcuts. In the same way as on a PC, you will find them with Alt and Control key shortcuts. Here you'll find them with, very often with, this one here stands for Shift, and this symbol here stands for Control. It stands for Command. Just like on a PC, you will find keyboard shortcuts like Control or Alt. Here you will find keyboard controls such as Command, which is this symbol here, and Shift, and so on. Command, by the way, is the key just to the left of your, left and right actually, of your spacebar. So our main screen consists of this large area here and this area over here. Now I'm actually going to close this. We're going to get to it a bit later. But I'd like you to pay attention to this area up here, which has some headings along the side here. And if I make more tracks, you'll see that they appear. I'll just do a number of them here right now. You see that they appear one above the other, and so if I have multiple different instruments playing, these will appear at the same time. So if I have multiple different instruments playing, their music will be happening on different instruments at the same time, depending on what appears in this area here. So this is called the arranging and sequencing area. By the way, before we get too deep into this, this GarageBand version has actually a very interesting and useful feature called the Quick Help, which I recommend turning on. So turn on the Quick Help, and you'll see this little window here that you can move around wherever you like, and you'll see that whatever I hold my mouse over, it will give you a description of that in the window. So that will be helpful as we move forward. But going back to the original thing we were looking at here, this is also called the workspace in this version. It's a primary area for recording, editing, and arranging audio, MIDI, and drummer regions. So this is this top area of the screen. It doesn't appear to be the top yet, but it will be soon. A couple of things to notice along here too. This little guy here, this line with the arrow on the top, which I can grab up here, this is called my playhead. And it's supposed to represent like a record needle or a playhead on a tape player. But whatever is going on underneath it, there's nothing here right now, but whatever is going on underneath that line is what's playing at the same time. I just pressed play, by the way. These up here are your what are called the transport controls. The main one here is play, which you can also activate with the space bar. It's also the recording head, so whenever you are recording later on, you're recording wherever this head is at the moment. Any new sounds will come in where it is. There's also some interesting things up here. As I move my playhead back and forth, you can see up here the number of bars, beats, and divisions also changes. So we'll be talking later on about how the meanings of bars and beats and so on, but this is what we refer to as musical time. And if you want to change it to actual real time, you can click on this time button up here, and then you will actually get normal clock time for your music as well. So if you had to make a 30-second piece of music, for example, this would be a useful way to switch back and forth and see how long your piece actually is. But generally, we're going to keep it in musical time. This part across the top, as you can see, is called the ruler. So it is what we use for measuring off your time. You can zoom in and out with this here as well. This along the top is then your ruler, and along the top here is what I call your loop bar, but it's also a what's called the cycle area, and it allows you to draw a little line here and move it back and forth. You can adjust the ends by clicking on either end and moving back and forth, like so. And if I had any music recorded already, if I play or record, it will do so up until it reaches this line, and then it will start back over again. So it only plays and keeps repeating what is within that yellow line. And when that is turned on, by the way, this cycle button here also lights up. So the next part I'd like to point out is the editing window. By the way, I'll also sometimes call this the cursor. So in the same way on a word processor you have a cursor, the playhead or the cursor is just where the action is happening at any time. It's very important that you know how to place that cursor where you need it. You can also use these controls for moving it back and forth as well, and this one here brings it back to the start. Now, at this time I'm going to introduce a very important keystroke for this course, and it is the command click. Command click will turn your arrow, your mouse head, into a pencil. And when I hold down command, I can then hit click, and I can build a block where I can then put some musical information. So again, command click will let me make regions, which is what we call these here. This is called a MIDI region. That's, by the way, the green ones. And once I have opened up a MIDI region, I can then double click on it and get this editing window in the bottom here. So this is the editing window. The way also to get this editing window is to hit this icon up here. So this little scissors is the editor's window. And whatever I have selected at the time is what's going to show up in the editing window. Now, a very important thing to note is as well is that the window can be a bit small sometimes. So once I've opened it up, I usually like to grab right here on this point and lift it up to give myself some more room to work, a little bit more area. So the editing window enables you to edit and modify whatever region you have selected up here. Incidentally, while I'm down here, you can draw notes in here as well by going command click. So if I wanted to just draw, let's just try that, and you can play that loop by itself. I'll just turn off the cycle region, but it'll still play that loop. Like so. So I'm just going to try and make this a little bit more. A little bit more musical to my taste anyway. Okay, so as you can see, the more you drag these up or down, it makes them higher or lower notes. And actually, there's a number of very important pieces of information here. When I click on a note, you'll see a little window pops up with the position and the pitch. So this is an F. This note is an F. It happens to be F1. And if you take a look at the keyboard along the side here, that's like a piano turned on its side. So you can hear how low these notes are, and the height or the how high the sound is depends on what number of octave you're in. And here this is octave 0, octave 1, C1, C2, all the C notes are shown. And you can keep scrolling up to C4, 5, 6, and so on. 7. And some instruments won't go this high. Like this one only stops at C7, for example. Okay, but you can just sort of imagine turning this on its side, and that's your piano keyboard. So each of these notes, as I hit them, you'll see them pop up on the piano keyboard as well. As I command clicked those notes in, they drew them all at this short little length, which happens to be a 16th note. We'll get to that later. But you can change their length by hitting either side of it and dragging this out, like so. And you can actually have it looping while you modify it. Okay. By the way, another very important keystroke is Command Z. So anytime you do something and you want to undo it, I usually have my finger poised over Command Z all the time and just ready to undo whatever I just did in case I don't like it. If I decide that I want to redo it, it's Command Shift Z to redo. So undo and redo are Command Z and Shift Command Z. We'll get to more features of this in a few minutes, but I'd like to show you the next part, which is the loop browser. Over here with this loop icon is the Apple Loops, and that brings up this window which gives you options for a whole bunch of different pre-made loops. And you'll notice here that also the MIDI ones are in green. And so actually if I take say a drum one and drag it up here, if it's made of MIDI information, I can actually go in and change that information if I want to. So I can modify this loop. Okay, so that's just an example of how you can take a pre-existing Apple loop and modify it to make it your own a little bit. However, as I've said I think before, however, in this class we won't be using these Apple loops really at all, but it's just so that you know that they're there, and sometimes you can use them to just explore and see how certain things are made. But coming back to the Apple Loops area, the green ones, as I said, are MIDI information, and these ones here are actually audio recordings. And so they can't be so easily edited, and if you open them up, you'll find they are shown by a waveform here. They can be modified in some ways, but everything's already mixed together. Next up we have new track. So to make a new track, first of all, there is a window here there's a drop-down menu for making new tracks and so on here. There's also this plus icon, which allows you to bring in either software instruments, these audio tracks, or drummer tracks. So we'll just talk about those for a minute. We've already discussed that software instruments are the ones that we've already used, which create MIDI information. Real instruments, or audio tracks, are using the microphone or another way to put in actual audio information. So for example, if I wanted to record my own voice, I could do that like so. Hello, 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 hello. And there's my voice. It's pretty quiet, I'd have to turn it up and so on, but it's oh, hello, 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 hello. And that comes up looking like this, audio 2. It's audio track number 2. And when you take a look at that in the editing window, you see the vibrations shown, so the waveforms of my voice speaking like this, and each one represents hello, one word. And those can be edited as well. The last type of track, and again these show in blue, the last type of track is the drummer track, which is a new feature on GarageBand. and it allows you to kind of take an actual recording of a drummer and modify what they're playing in real time. So you can see that it shows up as a bunch of waveforms on here, but if I start playing it, you can see that it's this fellow Kyle, and you have the loud and soft and simple and complex here. So if I wanted to make it louder and more complex, I can drag this ball loud and simple, simple and soft, or soft and complex. And you can see it makes it into an 8-bar section of music. And it's also using only these 3 drums, so the bass drum, the snare drum, and the hi-hat. But if you want to add in other things, hand claps, more toms, etc., you can kind of, there's the tambourine. So whatever you want to add into it. It's a quite interesting way of making drum sounds. Again, we won't be using it too much, but it can be used as a way to help you generate ideas, for example. But we'll be doing most of our work by entering drums directly into MIDI. One important keystroke you should take note of, and one that I use a lot, is the duplicate track function. So if I'm playing on this classic electric piano and I want to make another track very quickly, I will usually just hit Command D, which is the shortcut for making another track with the same settings exactly. This can be useful sometimes if I just want to move tracks, move information from one track to another to store it for a while, or if I want to just quickly make another kind of instrument very quickly. I know I want to also have a MIDI instrument, so I'll just Command D and make a duplicate track. The zoom functions are available by clicking this zoom bar up here, and that brings us closer or further out on your project. The track header at the beginning of each track is the title area that selects the track for editing. So if I want to, it also selects it for recording in most cases. So if I want to record, I'm just hitting up and down arrow right now, but I can also just click on this heading, and if I just click on this heading and bring up a keyboard, I will then be recording on this track. Now you'll notice there that I just recorded something kind of random. But it can very quickly go from some random playing to something actually a little more musical if you just select specific notes that you want to hear and use it just as a way to... I'm getting too far. Sometimes I'll use that keyboard just as a way of putting in a rhythm and then come into this editing area and select actual notes that I want to use rather than trying to hit the notes on the keyboard. The Record, Ready, Enable is found right here on audio tracks only. So here are some audio tracks, and if I want to record onto this audio track, I have to tell the computer to listen on this track and which track I want to record. So for now, for example, I've set this to be listening for the microphone in the computer, and so when I speak, you can see the level of the sound appear here. And I can actually turn this up to make it listen more carefully for my voice, or bring it down. And then when I hit record, I can then speak here. However, one thing important to note is when you're recording audio, I can't do it here as I'm doing this recording, but you would usually play the music on headphones and do your recording without getting the music playing out of your speakers coming into your recording. So that's one good reason why you want to wear headphones while you're doing your recording. That way you only get the sound of your voice or whatever instrument you may be playing on this audio track, and you don't get what you've already recorded. So I'll just play this track for a second. So you can hear I got some of my recording in the background, and you don't generally want that. So again, this is called also hey, hey. The next item on the list is the Record Ready Enable button, and actually in the this new version of GarageBand, they no longer have a button that you need to push before you can activate a track. All you need to do is select the track by clicking the track header as I described above, and that will record onto the track you've selected. Unfortunately, that means you can't easily record onto two tracks at once, but that's a problem for another time. So you can actually cross out the Record Ready Enable. However, in its place, you might want to put down the monitoring button. So this button here on audio tracks only will allow you to hear what you are saying as you're recording it. So if I turn it up, you can start to hear my voice, but you don't want to turn it up too high or it will start to feed back. If I turn it up a little higher, you can hear that feedback starts to happen because you're sending sound into the computer. It's getting louder coming out of your speakers and then going back into the speaker, back into the microphone to get louder again, and that's what feedback is. So generally you'd want to only use this when you have headphones on so that you can hear what you're doing through the headphones. Next up, we have a few buttons on the track header. By the way, you can rename a track header if you want to, say, call this the main keyboard line and call this one the backup keyboard, for example. So just by double-clicking on the instrument name, you can change its title. So, a couple of important buttons on the track headers. First of all, there's the mute button, which is this little speaker with a line through it. And this makes this track not play. So when I start playing, it is only playing tracks that are not muted. So all of these tracks would be playing, and this one would not be. And you can mute any number of tracks you want, and only the unmuted tracks will play. On the opposite side, you have the solo button. So these little headphones here will solo a certain track. So for example, if I solo this one, then all the other ones will have a flashing mute button, meaning that they've all been muted because the solo button is only playing this one. Now, of course, you can solo more than one track at once, but that just allows you to select which tracks you want to play. When you come to mixing down your music as well, it is important that only the instruments that are being played or that would be heard, so soloed tracks or unmuted tracks, will be mixed down into your final product. So basically, whatever you hear when you're doing your recording is what's going to come out on your final mixdown. Next on the list is we have here written disclosure triangle, and that's actually what it used to be called. Now it is called the automation icon. So if you take a look here at each of my tracks, if I click this button here, show or hide animation with the keyboard control is A also, it brings up some additional features. And what I now see is, say on my main keyboard, I have a volume switch here, and this line appears across, which wasn't there before. And what this line does is it actually lets me, I can draw points on that line by clicking, and then this is actually representing the volume of my track, of just this track. And you'll notice, by the way, this is the volume slider. This, by the way, is called the panning dial, which makes it go left or right on either side. And as I move this up and down, you can see the slider moving back and forth, because when I start playing this, that volume slider will follow whatever instructions I've given here. So basically I've given it instructions to be automatically moved up. This is called a fade in. And so that's the basis of automation. So again, you can turn as many of these buttons on as you like and have the volume increase and decrease automatically. You can also delete these buttons by highlighting them and deleting. You can also select them by making a box around them and moving them around like so. And they can get as complicated or as simple as you want. You can have multiple things being automated at once, by the way. For example, if I wanted to have a fade in, but also have the sound move from left to right, I could click this button here and select pan, and that would also give me a new button that will turn it from the left to the right. So if I wanted it to move back and forth like so, and also fade in, I'm just going to solo this so we can hear that only. And there are many other features that you can automate as well, but volume and pan are the two basic ones. I'm just going to undo all of those things though for now. And close my automation. Next on the list is regions. So these regions are blocks in the arrange window for moving areas of recorded MIDI or audio information. So making regions, as we've already discussed, can be done by command click. Lengthening and shortening regions is done by grabbing by the left or right side And it's important that you select near the bottom to get this icon here. So this is the resize pointer, and you can lengthen and shorten the region as much as you want. But as you move up on this edge of the region, it becomes a different kind of icon, which is the next one, which is called the looping region. This is the loop pointer, and it allows you to take, I haven't got any information on this one, but I'll do it with this one here. So I'm going to resize this box, and then I'm going to loop it. So get the looping icon, click, and drag, and then it will actually keep repeating that one section. And if I make any change to that section, if I make a change to the first one, you'll notice that they're all going to change as well. So any change made to the first one is going to change all of them. And this can be useful sometimes, but I actually find it's more useful to, rather than looping, copy and paste. So the next on the list is copying and pasting regions. So by clicking on a region to select it, you can then Command C for copy. You could also Command X to cut it out, and then you drag your cursor to wherever you would like to place it. Also make sure that it's on the correct track where you want to paste as well, and then Command V to paste. So I can actually paste a whole bunch of these, and any one of them can be modified. And that way only that box is modified. In the same way, I can take notes or blocks of notes and copy them and paste them in this area as well. A few things to know about Macs is that if you want to take a whole region, you can draw a box around an area and then copy to select it. The same thing works up here as well. You can make boxes to select things. You can also select one object and then hold Shift down and select individual bits like this. So I could copy this area only and paste it over here. Another place where this is useful is for taking areas of music, for example, and moving them up or down. So just taking a certain bunch of notes and moving them around. On the bottom of the page we have our inspector window. Now the name of this has changed in this new version of GarageBand, but the idea is the same. So if I just show my arranging window here, and then I go up to this little drawer icon, that brings up the list of all of the software instruments that I can be using on this track that I've selected right now. So the instrument that I've got selected right now is a vintage electric piano. The instrument that I've selected right now can be found by following these arrows here to the classic electric piano. But if I wanted something different, let's say a piano, this is the first menu here, all these different categories of instruments, and the further you go in, you get more and more specific types of instruments. So let's say piano. I can get these types of pianos or these experimental pianos. So let's try a Steinway grand piano. And this should now play on the piano. Or on a guitar, a classic clean electric guitar. Let's try some synthesizers. This has a lot more options, by the way. These are many different types of synthesizers, and here I'm going to choose a lead synthesizer, the Analog Crunch lead. And so you can see there's a wide variety of different types of instruments you can get on any of these green MIDI tracks. And the library, or inspector window button, will open that menu for you. What it brings you if you're on an audio track is quite different, though. Instead, you get a list of different types of effects that you can add to the sound of your recording. So, for example, if you were recording guitars, you could use electric guitar distortion, for example. And then if you were playing a guitar directly into the program, it would affect it in that way. You can actually affect your voice that way as well. Let's just try it. Hello. 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 It's not working right now. But if you're putting in your voice, for example, there are a number of different types of voices you may want to use, which just add a little brightness or different types of effects to your voice. There we go. So I'm now getting my voice coming through, and if I had headphones on, I could more clearly hear the sound of my voice with this bright vocal. A fuzzy vocal. Hello, hello. So these are a list of different effects that you can put onto your voice as you're recording your sound. You can change them after as well, after you've made your recording. I suggest going through and trying to record the sound of your voice or listen to the sound of your voice with headphones, along with a few of these different effects, as well as some of the effects for different instruments.